Hey everyone, it's Paul here from Scientific Painting. Hopefully today I'm going to teach you how to paint the glass orbs shown in the picture on the screen. They're meant to represent kind of just hollow glass orbs filled with a kind of smoky, viscous kind of poison material that's homage to the old poison wing globe ideas of GW, the old Skaven. So without further ado, let's see if we can do this. My first tutorial video recording, so please bear with me. I've tried to make this as clear as I can. So this is the mini that sparked this off. I put this up, got loads of lovely comments and lots of people asking how I did these orbs. So we've got this one here, the one at the base, these little eyes, and a collection at the back and on his tail. We've got a very slight OSL, but mainly it's just this gradient. Now in my mind these are pretty straightforward to do. They're just a gradient down to a light at the bottom, but the trick is to make sure that the gradient kind of follows down to where gravity would collect this gas at the bottom here. Then they've got just a hard specular highlight and a gloss varnish over the top. I did the same with these little vials here. So to best show this, I printed another model. These models are from Arch Brilliant Games. These are fantastic sculpts to 3D print yourself. So it's the same mini, all prepped. We just grayscaled him so we can mainly focus on the orbs. So this guy, and then I made these quick models just sort of slightly bigger to illustrate the same principle. So we'll start with the green. We're going to do the green ones on this guy. I'm just going to move my screen over. So we're going to do the same kind of green colours on this, and then on this we're going to do one green one, a red one and a blue one, just to show the same kind of effect in different colours. So we'll start with the greens. So what I tend to do is start with pick your middle colour and just flood the orb with it. So we'll be using this model colour lime green for the green ones. So let's start with that. A bit of our palette. The trick with a lot of this, to get this kind of weird kind of cloudiness, is just to keep the paint super thin so that you deliberately get kind of almost a patchy cover. I'm using water and I'm using kind of some glaze medium just to make sure it flows nicely. Just keep this paint relatively thin. This first coat's not too important because we're going to cover back over a fair bit of it, but let's just try and get the colours where we need them to start with. So the awesome music you're hearing is from Earhawks, one of my buddies from Twitch. He also has a mini painting channel. All of his details will be down in the video description below. But yeah, the guy, not only does he paint awesome models, he makes awesome music. Look at this green all over these orbs, and this just gives us the basis of the colour there. I'm not going to worry about being too neat on this. This is just a demo model. That's that one. The trick to making these orbs really work is near the end where the top of the orb is dark. So you paint it very much like most gemstone tutorials that you see. Dark at the top, colour collects at the bottom where the light would pass through the glass item, and then with the hard highlight in the darker area of the glass. Hopefully that makes sense to anyone. Just going to fully cover this. Yeah, not worrying if it's patchy a little bit, because we're going to paint over a fair bit of that. The main thing is just get this base colour on, because a lot we're going to do with very wet layers. It's useful to have the solid good background colour. Same with these orbs in here. These ones are tricky when I first did it because you don't see the bottom of the orbs with these, which is normally where all the colour would collect. So you have to kind of fudge it a bit and force the colour further up to near the top of the orb. Again, these sculpts are by Archvillain Games. They do a monthly Patreon, and it's all so far all I've really seen is kind of baddies, like monsters, but they're all bloody amazing. This month was these rats, the Affliction they called it, I think it was. April is Dark Elves, a drow with spider themes. And these guys printed super easy. Almost there. Right. As you guys might want to see it as well, I'm going to do his eye lenses. Work on them at the same time. And those little vials on his backpack. So I envision these as whatever nasty ingredients he adds to the glass orbs themselves be contained within these. Okay, so that's all the orbs on that model. We'll very quickly do one of these orbs. Again, we'll give it the base colour. It's just so I can give you a clearer view, because the orbs on the other model are pretty small. So these are just a real quick shape I've boshed together in 3D Studio Max and printed out just to demo on this channel. See, this is pretty quick doing all this. I think all in all, the orbs on the original model probably took me an hour to do, but I was finding my way with them as I did it. Okay, so that's a decent enough cover for what we're after. Okay, brush rinse. Okay. So now I'm going to move up. I'm going to do one highlight colour. So we're going to move up into a bright colour. This is Livery Green. Such an old bottle, the name's rubbed off. So we're going to take it. This is a nice Scorpion Green, I think it's the kind of equivalent to. Hopefully it's clear enough on the palette. Again, we're going to keep them super kind of glazy. Nice and thin, because we want that kind of cloudy, almost bad coatage. Okay, so we'll start with this guy. Again, we want all the bright colours at the bottom. So just go around the orb. Make sure that collects down the bottom. Again, see it's very patchy, and that's fine. Make sure you do all the full kind of 360 going around the orb. Then if I can then quickly wet and brush, just almost kind of like a wet blend of that edge into the green above. Just fuzz it in. Saves a lot of blending later on. And you find by the time you've been around and given everything a little coat, again with here, just do the bottom. From about halfway down the orb, I guess, we start highlights. And you can use water or spit blend and just blend out the top. It just saves a lot of work later on to blend the top out. Again, just make sure you get all the angles of the orbs, because they're 360 shapes. Again, blend it out. As long as your brush is wet, you can kind of half stipple, half wipe. Because usually working with quite glazy paints anyway. The key is just to keep pulling the paint down to the bottom of the orb. So you deposit most of the colour down there then. Again, just fuzz out that edge. This is why it was useful to get that first layer of green on, so you've got a base colour then to fuzz into. That's already being quite smooth, and we've only just done one colour and a simple kind of split blend. With these orbs again, because you like realistically that orb probably halfway is about that line, so that's we just basically put almost like a ring of the colour. Again, blend it out. We'll come back to these and we'll give them, it will be a bit more intense. The trouble with trying to paint these as glass, when they're obviously a solid object, is you'd normally be able to look through the glass. That's what we're trying to represent, almost like you're seeing the colour on the other side. So looking down on these orbs, you're kind of looking at the smoky residue that's at the bottom of them, even though you're seeing them through the top. Okay, with these eyes, exactly the same principle. We go bright at the bottom, a little half moon shape. And then a little fuzz, just to blend that in. Keep your brush wet, and just stipple texture around. That just starts to add that second tone. That'll help a bit. Start to see the second tone in the thing. So we'll let that dry. We'll just throw exactly the same principle on here. Switch to a slightly bigger brush. A bit more glazed medium. Keep it nice and wet. Again, we whop this in at the bottom. You haven't got to worry about being neat. This is just to show the principle. And I want that paint wet, so I can then blend the top out. If you do start to see lines and any kind of banding, just go and add a bit more paint. Again, wipe it out, keep everything wet and moving. And again, this just adds to the kind of, almost like the cloudiness inside the orb. You get little wisps of colour, then that's fine, it's not a problem. Keep it moving, just keep blending those layers out. And it's kind of these little wisps that stop it being just a gemstone. Okay, blend that out. Okay, so we'll let that dry out. Just put a little bit at the bottom here. Intensify that colour. Okay, we'll go back to that in a second. Right. That is mini. Right, now we want to start coming up to darker. So we're going to go with a darker heavy green. And we can take these, we'll take these right up to a yellow on the highest highlights and to a black at the top of the spheres. And it's that black you'll see on here, the black tops, that really kind of sells the glass. Right, so again we get the glaze, make sure this is nice and thin, it gives us room to manipulate it and it doesn't make the steps too hard. So we go to the top. We probably want about the top third of the orb. So picture the orb, make sure you get the clear what the kind of bottom is depending on the angle of how the mini's holding it. About top third, and again just try and fuzz the edge out. Either using spit or just use some water and just fuzz that top out. Again, you run off like that and then just control it and soak it up. notice the paint start to get a bit tarry at all, then just stop, move on to the next orb, and come back to the other one. Again, top third-ish, just a slightly different one because the orb's in the ground. Yeah, put it at the top, fuzz the line in. Yeah, you guys can tell I'm moving pretty quick on this. I'm conscious that I'm trying to keep it as a concise tutorial. You can spend a bit longer smoothing these out if you want to. I'm confident even this rough will sell the illusion of what you're trying to achieve. And there's two of them, there's a bit of going back and forth. I'm getting these colours. Some of that's just because it's an orb and you've got 360s around the sides. You might go heavier on one than the other. Okay, go again, top. Keep in mind we're going to almost black right at the very top. So it's just this halfway blend now at the moment. If you come down a bit far, don't worry, because one of the next steps is we go back with our middle colour and we glaze through the centre of the orb. And that helps just to keep it all clearly defined. Okay. To these ones as well. Again, these, because you can't see the full orb, they're a little bit more distorted as to how we do it. But again, much the same. Most of the top of the orb, I'm going to get with a nice dark green. Almost like you're just leaving a ring of the lighter green we've worked on. Keep blending. It's because I'm working with such a thin paint that a few layers isn't a bad idea sometimes. When it comes to the eyes, we want to do the same principle, opposite half. So this at the top. We'll do little arcs at the top, half moons. I guess this doubles up as a quick lens tutorial as well. Okay, take your brush, so you got a wet surface, and just feather that blend in a bit. And just making sure. Now near the top of the orbs we are going into the solid. I'm going to touch a little bit of dark into the top edges of these vials and reinforce this. See, he's already starting to kind of take shape. Right, we'll go to our big guy. Pin paint. I don't want it so thin it runs down the side of the orb. Now we'll blend out that edge. subtractive blending. I'm making sure it comes down and then thinning it out so much. It doesn't matter, right? Right, let's take it to the next darkness. So we're just going to add good old black. Darken some of the green right down. So maybe the top fifth of the orb now. Again, you can see it's nice and wet. Just going to let us around the edges. Feather that in. Back to the wet stuff. The dark top has to be visible, it has to have a nice visibility. Like I said, the black is really what seems to sell the glassiness of these. While we're at the front, let's see the eyes. A tiny little touch in the top. Super wet, so it can be moved around a little bit. And it doesn't give a too hard an outline to it anyway. And I'm going on the assumption most people are using a wet palette for this. It really does help because you've still got those lovely in between colours that you can pull from. If you've not using a wet palette, I highly recommend moving over to one. Okay, again, I'm just going to just do a very tiny little bit at the top of each of those, just to give us that contrast we need. Right, dark tops on this. See, it's starting to build up now. I'm just painting circles of colour and then feathering out the edges. I'm using a spit blend, but if you don't like the idea of putting paint in your mouth from your brush, you can always just get your brush wet from your water pot. But a bit of bad taste in paint never hurt anyone. So all of them. Let's do a real quick one on the big orb. And I'm jumping between these two. This is just so you can see it clearer. At least see the steps clearer. It's a bigger orb, so it's going to be a bit rougher because it would have needed more time to blend these all out. But you get the idea. So the top, I'm not going to lick that because there's a lot of paint on there. And again, feather this out. So it's kind of like wet blending, but we're not blending one paint to the other, we're kind of taking away. You can see it's pretty much quite a nice smoothish gradient for the time taken. Okay, let's go one step down. Let's go straight into the actual black now. But again, keep it thin. Use plenty of either water or glaze medium. I'm going for about, it's pretty thin. This is going to give us time to push it around, fuzz it out. We just want the top ring now. And fuzz the edge. It does creep down the side of the orb. Don't panic. We can always restore some of that middle colour. But all these kind of wipey blends that you're doing is given almost these kind of horizontal swooshes. It's going to look like the gas moving around, or the liquid, or however you want to envision these in your head. Again, you can do this just with water. I tend to always use like a real diluted glaze medium. I just find it gives a better result. And let me kind of blend these together a bit. So you can see we've knocked back almost all the colour there, but now we're getting this almost like a halo of the colour, which looks like if you were looking down into the orb. This is why the black top, or the darker top of the sphere, is so important. It really starts to sell the depth of the sphere. Don't feel like you've got enough to stretch out, just add a little bit more around your perimeter. And the last few steps go into the extreme shadow and the extreme highlight. Quite organic. You'll find yourself jumping around a bit as you can control the depth of it. Let's do the eyes while they're looking at me. Again, make sure that black is super thin, like really thin, but control it. Don't let too much moisture onto your brush. Control it. You don't want any runoff, and then just touch the top of those lenses. So we get a bit of a black top to them. Focal distance around that, so there you go from there. Again, look back around the orbs if you can see any that really don't have a proper black top. Go back, give them another coat, because we're working with those thin shades, the thin coats, sorry. Sometimes it can take a few to really build that black to black. Each time you do it like this, you're effectively improving your gradient. Just kind of slightly smaller area each time. If you can see an edge to it, then try and fuzz it out. Okay, let's go to our big one while the other mini dries. Touch too thin, add a bit more paint to that. Fuzz the edge out. top where it's kind of slid off. Let that dry. If we mess with it too much, it's going to start pulling the paint off. Okay. Right, so now on some of these, there's some quite distinct steps on this. What we can do is go back to the very green we started with, so our middle green. And again, keeping things thin, super thin. We're almost making the glaze now. It's like really watery, but controlled. And just blend back over that kind of middle section. Feather both top and bottom out. Again, this helps make kind of wisps and also just reinforces our colour back into the middle. So any that you notice, they've got very clear lines. Let's give you a chance to smooth some of that out. I'm moving it about as fast as I kind of can. Keep this tutorial concise. Smooth out our middle band. Don't forget we've got full 360 to try and blend around on. I feel like I've lost some of the top colour there, so just going in. Again, this is where the wet palette's fantastic to be able to pick up shades. Okay. So now we need to start going up to the extreme highlight. So we go back to our brightest green, that kind of the was it livery green or scorpion green? This almost neon green. We'll go back because it was such a thin coat and it was a pale colour. We'll go back and we'll just bring in our bottom of the orbs. Again, feather it up into the tops. Again, if you get the odd wisps, it's kind of good. It looks like the smoke inside, a smoky effect. Don't worry about it being perfectly smooth. It's just important that all that light colour is at the bottom of the orb. So I'm almost using a stippling motion. Just to bring it down off there. That's looking good, that one. So again, with this one it's tricky, just bring it bottom where you can. And again, almost use your smoothing as a subtractive, you're just moving that edge around the bottom of the orb. Trickier when there's not a full sphere to work on. Here we've got the nice clear one, so we'll get that nice super bright at the bottom there. Then feather it out into the top. So you're doing basically exactly what you just did with black, but now we're working with nice pale colours. These little ampules, we can bring some of this to the bottom. Feather them out. Wipe down. Wet brush and just wipe down on the top. It'll just feather the tops out. lose the intensity of the colour as you feathered it, and just put a little bit more and make another coat. Each time when you kind of make a stipply stab, just try and finish your brush stroke at the bottom, so you're leaving most of the pigment then at the bottom of the orb. It's really starting to look kind of gassy in the middle there. This isn't so much, it's got a bit too much of an edge to it, so I'll add a bit of paint and then just stipple it around. Just to break up that horizontal line. Tiny little bits around here. Again with a wet brush, just feather them out. So you're kind of blurring, you're just blurring the kind of hard highlights you're putting in here. Because we can't see the bottoms of the orbs, all we can do is do a hard light point at the top there. Gives the impression that we're looking down through those orbs. You'll find you'll probably end up spending a bit more time on the ones you can really see more. So the ones at the front here. That's pretty good. Right, let's add a little bit of this to his lenses. I know we've already done it. It reinforces the bottom. Bottom arc. Okay. This isn't bright enough. So we need to go to like a hard yellow at the end. So it's important to get a good shine from this kind of this hard scorpiony green, almost neon. Otherwise, the jump to the yellow is going to be too strong. Tease those kind of wisps of colour up into the areas above. I'm super confident that anyone can do this, no matter what you're kind of, because it doesn't require tons of brush control. It's just keeping that paint thin. Just touch the tops of those. Really starting to build up the vividness then of those files. I'm pretty much just making kind of like little stabby wet blobs of that colour, and then with the super wet brush just tease it out. Because the paint's so wet, when you put it on fresh it looks bright, and then when it dries it kind of loses that intensity, so that's why sometimes it's worth doing a couple of little layers. While they dry, let's just hit this one so you guys can see the idea better. Go back to our brightest green, thinning it out so it's nice and wet. That's possibly a little bit too wet, but let's give it a go. And swoosh out the top line, stipple it, or kind of washy motions of your brush, however you want to move that paint around. And then if you get bits to come up into the middle, then fantastic, because they look like kind of wisps of smoke then. I'm just going to reinforce this bottom bit. This really does want to be this bright green. This is where all the smoky, gassy residue is sitting at the bottom of these orbs. ready for it to be broken open and set sprawling out. And tease the edges, just break up those edges a bit. This is the same process of doing on the smaller orbs, just slightly bigger so you can see it a bit better. So fundamentally it's just a gradient from black through to a nice bright green, but ideally you want little wisps of the colour coming up into the orb to give an uneven edge, almost like a gaseous edge. Right, we'll go back to the model. Next highlight stage, we go into a bright yellow. We do 50-50 of the bright green and the bright yellow, and then we'll do one final highlight, which is just going to be the bright yellow. You could use flash kits for this. I prefer this. It's kind of almost like a canary. So this is phalanx yellow. It's already an air colour, but we're still going to thin it. So we do a mix. So we're going to just jump straight to that yellow. You can see the mix in the middle here. Make sure it's nice and glazy. And again, we go for a smaller area than before. Exactly same principle. Get that wet paint on there. Kind of avoid your brush and then feather the edge in. And again, when it feathers, you're inevitably going to get some kind of texture come off it. It's going to give us that gas. Again, we haven't got a lot of space in this one, so just at the bottom. Just a little, almost like a ring around the bottom of the orb. This is to almost give it that inner light, as opposed to informing the colours so much. One here. Green highlighted up with yellow always gives a fantastic result. Gives you a real almost fluorescence to it. Much what we're trying to portray here. Very bottoms of the vials. We want to make sure we can see a little bit of that colour on the bottom of this. A rear view of that orb there. Exactly same principle with these. We want a tiny touch. You almost want that yellow to bleed into the recesses. With all the previous green work we've done, the yellow shouldn't read as yellow. It should always read as a kind of almost like a sick green. Okay. Not super bright. We want to just hit the very bottoms of his lenses. Just give him Some really nice contrast on those there. We're almost there, people. Let's add a little bit to this big orb, just so we can do this in the same light. Okay. Now we'll take a quick on the ones where we got full spheres. We'll go to the pure yellow. We'll just add a tiny bit of that to the very bottom. Our last colour, last highlight at the bottom there. I'm only going to do that on the full spheres where we can actually see that bottom, very bottom of the circle, sphere. There, that shows all the colours pretty much through on that one. Yellow right at the bottom, up to black at the top. Okay, the very final thing is that the little hard speculum highlight. Just some little dots at the top. Now we're going to gloss varnish these as well, which will give you natural hard speculum highlights anyway. But just in case we don't get them, let's make our own. Thin the white. Again, you want nice, perfect control. You also need a nice tip to your brush. We're going to be able to do a nice little dot. Now, I always do 2 dots. So you want to work where your light source is. Wherever it hits that black surface, a nice white controlled dot. I tend to do a second one just for illustrative purposes like that. Now the key thing of this is to keep all your dots, all your highlight points the same, unless you've got multiple light sources. So they line up, so the light's hitting those orbs at the same place. On the lenses, we want one tiny little dot right on the darkmost point, like that. Come around to wherever there's other orbs, here at the back. So we know our light is coming in from this angle here. So again on the top here, we want a nice dot. Control your dots. That, so they all match. Bring this in the same angle. Now we could add them to here, but in all honesty they get lost on the horizontals of those. Everything's got a highlight dot now. Again, just to illustrate, on the bigger orb, if our light source is, say here, we'd put a nice speculum point. I tend to do another dot. I just find 2 just give a better reflective kind of thing. So I'll wash that off. Ideally you'd give them a little while to dry before we gloss varnish them. I'm going to trust that they're dry enough. You just want a nice, whatever gloss varnish of your choice. I'm using normal Barrier stuff. I tend to just make sure my brush is wet, or at least damp when I'm putting this on, to try and avoid brush strokes. And this is the very last bit we do. Just give it a gloss varnish. This further reinforces the fact that they're glassy and shiny. If you are a person that that sprays your models once they're finished to seal them, like with a matte varnish, you're going to want to do this after that, or at least again once you've matte varnished your figure to keep this effect. And it really does look great if you've got a matte finish. I'm going to do the lenses. Just a little dab of lenses. Home stretch now, peoples. I did those little glass vials, and then the ones in the backpack. What you'll find, much like a painting, any painting, when they're varnished, it will make the black appear blacker. Again, it reinforces that darkness that the glass needs. Just while that dries, just give this a quick okay. That pretty much wraps it up. For timing, I'm not going to do the other two colours in this tutorial. I'll keep you open for maybe another video. But yeah, so this gives us our glassy orbs. So they have an irregular kind of horizontal banding with the colours. But the key is that nice dark top. All the colours collected at the bottom of the orbs. And if you can't see the bottom, then make sure you have at least one bright ring to really sell it like in the basket. I mean, they're like super marbly in the background there. And you can add a very slight OSL effect. So on this guy, tried to add just a real subtle colour tint to his leg there. Obviously you've got a slight aura on the floor. This illuminates the tower. More importantly, in the backpack, I made sure that they shine around the thing. Yeah, that's the general gist of this. So hopefully that's hopefully everyone can do the same thing. Like I say, you really don't need too much control to do that. It's just a case of keeping those colours nice, hitting that intensity of black and the intensity of the colour at the bottom to really sell the effect. Other than that, thanks everyone for watching. Sorry it's been a bit rambly. It's my first one. I'm trying to do it without doing masses of edits. Thank you Earhawks for providing the music for the tutorial. It's fantastic, man. Thank you Archvillain for these fantastic sculpts. It's an amazing patron. Anyone's into 3D printing their own minis should go and check them out. They're brilliant. All the links will be in the video description. I am live at Twitch Tuesdays and Thursdays, usually from 8 o'clock, over at www.twitch.tv/SciSquig. Other than that, search for my socials or look at the links below, and I'll see everyone soon. Take care.